in your line, cracking helmets in. I bring the pain, so what you gon' do? Stand there and just get shook out ya. So clean out your locker, I'm out to get ya. Cause I just popped ya. You can't take the pressure. You might as well quit cause you just can't last. Mad in 2000, put your face in the grass. And your pride in the dirt, so put on a skirt. If you come on the field and don't wanna get hurt, just bruised and beaten, all black and blue. And it's been like that since Madden 92. You better come harder than hard, rougher than rough. Put up your guard, get ready to crush. It's things on this field that you just can't change. EA Sports is in the game. What you want?
How's it going, guys, and welcome back to another build video. In this one, we're taking a look at Bear Brawler Moze, which is my Bear Fist focused Iron Bear build, which is more of an Iron Bear build than a Moze build. It is focused very heavily on playing Iron Bear more than you're going to be playing Moze, and while there are definitely better Iron Bear builds out there, this is the one that I find the most fun, and it's also pretty damn fucking good. Plus, if you're the kind of person that just wants those fucking big-ass mech versus big-ass monster epic fights, this is the build for you. But with that being said, let's get into this build. So coming to our skill trees, the first thing you're going to notice about all of them is that this is a very weird skill point distribution. And that is entirely intentional. As I said, we aren't playing this for Moze, we are playing this for Iron Bear, so mostly everything that I've spec'd is to get the most out of Iron Bear himself. There's very few things in this build that are spec'd to help us out outside of Iron Bear, unless it is action still cooldown rate, or we literally just had nowhere else to put the points, or it's something that has a bit of overlap between the two of them. Starting off with our red tree though, as of course we are using Bear Fist, this is the entire core of what we're doing with this build, and the augment that we usually run is Wild Swing, as this is just the best damage, along with potentially giving us some elemental coverage, as what Wild Swing does. It provides bonus damage of a random elemental type. However, what this also does is it makes the fist do a little bit of splash damage. Now this isn't actually entirely splash damage, as it doesn't get any splash damage boost, because that would make far too much sense. This gets grenade damage boost. Now, specifically, it's not actually the fist itself that's getting the grenade damage, but it's the elemental damage portion of the fist that gets grenade damage. However, it doesn't get elemental damage. So elemental damage is worthless. Splash damage, for the most part, is worthless, which is why we don't end up going toward cross promotion, because that doesn't actually boost it. For how fun Fist is, it is very awkward, and it was very frustrating to figure all this shit out. However, what it does get, and more importantly what it gets, is this provides the ability to get Fire in the Stag Den, which is one of Moze's best damaging abilities. Again, this is where that overlap kind of comes in, as Fire in the Stag Den is pretty much all Moze needs to deal a decent bit of damage. She can kill Guardians on True Guardian Takedown with this build with pretty much just Fire in the Stag Den. For the rest of Red Tree though, we grab Security Bear, as this is just decent defense for Iron Bear. Armored Infantry, as this gives Moze a bit of gun damage, but it's mostly just to get us down the tree a little bit more, where we pick up Vladoff Ingenuity, Drowning in Brass, and Experimental Munitions. Again, a lot of the stuff in this tree isn't actually for Bear, however this does provide us with the ability to pick up Close the Distance, which is very important against flying enemies, be it Guardians or Death Spheres or whatever the hell else you may need it for. It is a very important option to have, which is why we invest a lot of points into this tree to get this far down, even though it's not necessarily needed. Not only is this effective against flying enemies though, but it is also just very fun to snipe them out of the fucking sky with it. Coming back to the blue tree, of course, like I said, we're grabbing Fire in the Stag Den, as this is very good damage for both Moze and Iron Bear. Deadlines, so that we have a little bit more uptime while we're in Bear. Grizzled, to reduce cooldown while we're out of Bear and to be outside of Bear as little as possible. Stainless Steel Bear has the double effect of just giving us better Iron Bear stats, but also providing more damage to Fire in the Stag Den for some goofy little reason. But with all this, we also get enough points to come down to Vampire, which will keep us in Bear a hell of a lot longer than we otherwise could. In the green tree, we grab Cloud of Lead. Again, another skill that doesn't really affect Iron Bear, but it's kind of the only option. You could take a point out of this though and put it into Daka Bear if you're playing with a friend, but otherwise it's not really necessary, and just grabbing Cloud of Lead is probably your best bet. Stoke the Embers and Scrappy, again, is just to move down the tree further. We grab Scorching RPMs, which does give us a little bit of Iron Bear damage, along with some good stats from Moze, and all this is to come down and grab the best just raw damage for Iron Bear in Specialist Bear. Worth noting with this, you don't have to have the same augments equipped, you only need to have 2 Bear Fists equipped to get the bonus. So you can use one with with Wild Swing, and the other with Close the Distance without losing this damage buff. And finally to purple, we pick up Biofuel, as this is just some more very good sustain for Iron Bear, really big guns for some more Iron Bear damage, and then we grab Double Time for a little bit of movement speed, which is actually incredibly helpful, especially for a melee in heavy quotations build for Iron Bear, as movement speed just provides a lot less time between moving between enemies. We also put points into Big Surplus. Again, this is a very strong still for Moze and is very good if you find that you still don't have quite as much damage as you'd like outside of Iron Bear. This will definitely make it so that you have more than enough to still feel quite strong between your bears, but you only actually need 1 point into here, and you could put more of those points into Never Gonna Give You Up if you want even more bear uptime, but even with just 2 points into here, you shouldn't have too many struggles. So I find that usually just dumping the points fully into Big Surplus is often just the better option, but that's up to personal preference. So coming to our gear, of course, let's start with our weapons, which really I only carry a plasma coil or a free radical for Moze herself, as again, we're kind of weaker in the Moze department, so just using very strong weapons for her is just going to be your best bet and make your life a hell of a lot easier. But for Bear, we have the Dark Army and the Boogeyman that we can hold using the Anointment, which increases Bear Fist damage by 300%. This is an absolute must for this build, and if you're going to go into Bear, you need to make sure that you are holding one of these guns. But specifically why we use the Boogeyman and the Dark Army is because their special effects actually activate as long as you're holding them while you're inside of Iron Bear. Now, it is also worth keeping in mind with our weapons that with other Iron Bear builds, you are able to hold an Unforgiven, as that will provide a massive crit damage boost, but unfortunately with Bear Fist, we can't crit, so that actually doesn't do anything for us. You might also be thinking, wait, but it's Bear Fist, you go punchy punchy. It's not melee damage. Bear Fist pretty much only gets action still damage, with a couple exceptions in like a few sources of splash damage and grenade damage. There's really no consistency here, at least not that I can find. It's not all sources of grenade damage. It's not even all sources of action still damage, as we'll get into a little bit later. It's very odd, but I promise you, I've done so much testing, and pretty much everything I tell you in this video is the only things that will really affect Iron Bear. I tend to prefer the Boogeyman, as this just has better overall damage. As the Dark Army, while the drones are still there, they don't really do that much damage on their own, and because we don't have any other elements being applied to them, it's kind of not worth it. However, one specific synergy that they do have, which is very nice, is that they are able to crit, which does mean that experimental munitions can be activated by them, and if experimental munitions is activated by them, that can then proc Never Gonna Give You Up or other status effect related stills, which can be pretty damn good. So I usually just hang on to both, as it can be good to swap between them. However, I also carry around a Zaitsev's Eruption, again with the Bear Fist Anointment, as when this gun overheats, it will launch out a volley of rockets, which will debuff enemies, and this can be very useful for bossing, as it will boost the damage of Iron Bear as long as the debuff is active while you're slapping those enemies around. While it's overheating, you can also melee cancel or emote cancel, or just as long as you interrupt the animation somehow of you repairing the weapon, you can spam out a lot of these volleys. Now, as we go here, I'm also going to showcase some things that don't actually affect Iron Bear, and unfortunately, the Guardian Angel is one of those things. Not only that, but the 150/90 Anointment as well. Both of these have absolutely no effect on Iron Bear whatsoever. In any of my testing, I wasn't able to find any difference between holding one of these in Iron Bear and not, which is quite unfortunate, as these could have been very solid options for specific situations. The reason I do want to point some of this stuff out, though, is because a lot of this is stuff that usually works with other action stills. It's just that Bear Fist is a little bit quirky. But coming to our shields, our basic shield that we're going to be running for the most part is a Plus Ultra, especially if you can get a double health roll on this. An alternative, though, is using the Mendel's Multivitamin Shield, as that is just a quest reward, which can also give you a shit ton of health, but not nearly as much as the Plus Ultra can. With this shield, you're going to have around like 6 million HP, and you're going to be absolutely unkillable. This is perhaps one of the tankiest builds in the entire game, and that is despite the fact that you are going to be in the faces of enemies a majority of the time, but you're going to be able to tank almost any damage in this game. I don't know if I have the clip of it, but I literally tanked 4 barrels to the face and was perfectly fine. But for bossing, using an Ass Break 0.M is very good, as you do get the action still damage bonus from the circle that this lays down on the ground when it breaks, which gives Iron Bear a hell of a lot more damage for much reduced tankiness, but if you're going to be one-shotting a boss with your fists anyways, you don't really need the tankiness. As for the anointments on the Plus Ultra, you have a couple options. You can either use when Iron Bear ends, it kills increase Iron Bear's cooldown rate by 30%, or on Action Still End, Action Still cooldown is increased by 50% for a short time. Both of these are actually very similar. I really didn't notice a huge difference between the two of them. I found maybe the Iron Bear specific one was like a little bit better, but it really doesn't matter. You could use either of these. However, there is a third option in an ASE element. Again, if you just find that your Moze is a little bit weaker than you want her to be, I don't think you will. I don't think this is necessary, but it is an option. And again, while the Revolter is one of those weird global elements that does apply to many action stills, it does not apply to Iron Bear for some odd reason. This goes for any global element like Terror Cryo, URAD, and the Green Monster. None of these things actually apply to Iron Bear. For our grenade, generally for mobbing, we use a CMT. With the Iron Bear active, taking damage has a 20% chance to spawn a grenade anointment. This is what gives us a hell of a lot of our tankiness. While this isn't exactly necessary, the health sustain that this provides is absolutely nuts, and you'll pretty much never go down below half HP. Though we do swamp it up again for bossing using an Its Piss instead, as this is another very strong debuff which applies to Iron Bear and also stacks with the Jaidsevs. Again, we use the same anointment on here as it's kind of just our best bet, and unfortunately, for some reason, another instance of something just not working on Iron Bear. Despite this anointment saying on grenade throw, weapon, grenade, and action still damage are increased by 25%, and our Bear Fists getting both action still and grenade damage, this doesn't provide any damage boost to the fists whatsoever, and I don't know why. It just doesn't. So for our class mod, we usually use the Raging Bear for mobbing, as this is just the best uptime and damage mix that we can get here. But for just big raw damage, again, perfect for bossing, we use the Flare, as this gives us a shit ton of damage the less time we actually spend in Iron Bear, as the damage goes a little bit lower the longer that we're in it. These are pretty much the exact inverse. Overall, they will provide you with a similar damage output. The Raging Bear charges up its damage the longer you're in Iron Bear, as you gain more damage every time Iron Bear takes damage, and the Flare just starts off at max and slowly decreases the damage that it gives you the less fuel that Iron Bear has remaining. But of course, the rolls that you want on these are action still damage, grenade damage, cooldown rate, action still duration, that sort of stuff. Anything action still related, and grenade damage. You don't get splash damage from these though. The only splash damage I found that you can actually get on Bear Fist is the Blastmaster or the Green Monster, as both of those provide that weird kind of splash damage, but that is the only way that you get splash damage bonuses on Bear Fist. And finally, coming to our Relic, again, you're gonna want the same sort of stuff on this as with your passives for your class mod. Anything action still related, grenade damage, any of that. But that AoE damage right there on this one does not affect Iron Bear. Of course it doesn't. But that is kind of a theme with relics, is that there's really not much here that actually affects Iron Bear. If you want something here that does something for Iron Bear, pretty much your only option is the Atom Bomb. But at that point, you're kind of just playing with a hell of a lot of RNG, because you need to roll that you get radiation damage on your punch. You need to hope that that radiation damage actually applies a dot, and then you need enemies close by to actually be hit by that dot that don't just die to the AoE of your fist anyways. So while Atom Bomb is an option, I wouldn't really recommend it as the option. Instead, I would prefer either a Snowdrift Victory Rush or a Pearl of Ineffable Knowledge. The only reason I wouldn't recommend the Pearl is that while it is better overall damage for Moze, you don't get as good passives, as your passives can be rolled to better affect Iron Bear. Now, personally, with how my Victory Rush is rolled, I would probably be using a Pearl. However, you can get a much better Victory Rush than I have. So if you get far better passives, the Victory Rush is better. Otherwise, the Pearl is just better damage for while you're outside of Iron Bear. Now, the reason we use a Snowdrift Victory Rush is because not only is it just very good V1 damage on that Victory Rush for Moze, which she does not have a lot of access to, but I find that Snowdrift just provides her a lot of mobility and the ability to get out of some bad situations that you'll probably find yourself when you throw Iron Bear into a large group of enemies and start swinging. If you were to run out of fuel in that situation, the Snowdrift can very quickly bail her out. Now, just some things to keep in mind gameplay-wise, you got some like combos, so to speak. The most basic one for mobbing is just alternating your fists left and right properly. There's a very good timing that you can get where you can actually like time it properly and then just start mashing, as the cooldown is perfectly timed to where the second that one fist is down, the other can punch again. This is really good against a lot of trash mobs and just areas where you want a lot of damage happening fast. Against tankier enemies, pretty much just anything with 3 health bars, or like everything in True Guardian Takedown, you're gonna want a double punch, which is just you press both at the same time and you do a big boom. While there's more downtime between them, that's just your biggest burst damage. If you use close the distance, the quickest way to kill something is to get the timing down between yoinking and smacking the second it just comes right in front of you. And then finally, it's worth keeping in mind that Iron Bear does actually have a melee of its own, or more like a stomp. And that stomp is incredibly good for staggering enemies, especially staggering enemies that have a shield. So you can make them lower it and then you can smack their teeth in. But that's gonna do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, definitely consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, all that. Down in the description will be a link to my Discord server where you can find a download for this save file. And just above that link will be a link to my Twitch channel, where I will be live right after this video goes up. But with that all being said, I hope to see you guys in the next one.